His first sentence was, "If you really want to be a mom, don't be so stubborn." It was at that moment I realized that the mother in his plan was never me, just a suitable person. From that sentence, all his lies, his schemes, the seemingly perfect understanding between him and my sister, began to seep out through the cracks. Until he discovered that I had all the secrets, his knees weakened, his words faltered, and he grasped at the air like a caught liar seeking salvation. I looked at his panicked face and finally understood that regret was something he had never known, until it wrapped around his neck like an iron chain, making even breathing a struggle. I remember that night was a Tuesday at 7. Only a warm orange pendant light illuminated the kitchen, casting its glow on the half-cut carrots. I stood there, still holding the knife, while he leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, as if explaining reason to an unreasonable child. "I'm just saying," he repeated, "if you really want a child, some ways are just more realistic." I put down the knife. "Are you talking about that again?" "I'm just talking about the most efficient method," he said, tilting his chin as if explaining a simple math problem. "Emma already agreed to help us with surrogacy, but look at that clinic's quote, over $30,000. We simply can't afford it." He pulled out his phone and flipped to a spreadsheet he had clearly spent a lot of time making. "Look, I've calculated that if we do IVF your way, plus surrogacy, with loan interest, fees, medications, over 3 years we'd have to pay at least $45,000. I looked at the screen, then back at him, seeing the pride in his brow as though giving a professional presentation. "So, what are you suggesting?" I asked. He lifted his eyes to me, as if he had been waiting for me to ask that very question. "We could take a more direct approach." "Direct?" I repeated, hearing myself. "You mean, with Emma?" "Temporary. Rational." He raised his hand to interrupt. "We're not filming a movie, not sneaking around. I mean a clinical way. Since we trust her, and she's willing to help, why not save that money? The child would still be ours." He emphasized ours, as if highlighting an irrefutable logic. I didn't speak. He seemed to take my silence as encouragement, standing up and waving his phone in front of me. "Don't put so much pressure on yourself. It's just biology," he said. The kitchen light was warm, but his tone sent chills down my spine. We lived in a 2-story suburban house, the living room always heavy with the cologne he liked, thick enough to cling to the sofa. As he liked to say, it was the scent of a mature man. My sister Emma occasionally came over to help with the dog and would wrinkle her nose, laughing, "Oh my God, Mark, you're treating cologne like air freshener." Mark would always laugh along, but his eyes lingered just a bit longer when she left. I never paid much attention to those glances. Not until later. "So you think it's because I'm not trying hard enough?" I asked. He placed his glass on the table, his voice soft but unervingly steady. "It's not that you're not trying hard enough, it's that you're not practical enough." "Practical?" I repeated. "Yes." He didn't flinch, looking me straight in the eyes. "You want a child, I want a child. This is our last chance. You can't let subjective feelings trap both of us." He enunciated the word feelings sharply, as if I were throwing a tantrum. "Your sister is offering us the most cost-effective, feasible solution," he said, stepping forward. "Do you want me to go find a stranger? Or do you think your sister isn't trustworthy enough?" The kitchen fell silent enough that I could hear the refrigerator compressor. He pressed on, "Do you even want a child?" By this point, the conflict lay bare, like a knife on the table. I hung a towel on the handle and took a deep breath. "I want a child, but I won't let you do that." He sneered suddenly. "See? You just don't want to solve the problem." Then he walked into the living room and turned the TV up to full volume, as if to emphasize that the conversation was over. The next evening, my sister Emma came over. She wore a light blue hoodie and her hair loosely tied, as if ready to nap on our sofa anytime. When she saw me, she immediately smiled. "Mark told me," she said, hanging her coat on the chair. "I just wanted you to know I'm willing to help. No matter the method." I stared at her and poured water into a glass. "Did he explain everything in detail?" I asked. She paused for a moment, then nodded. "Yes. I understand your feelings and know how hard this is for you. But if you can't afford the procedure," she hesitated, voice softening. "He just wants you to worry less." "So you think his suggestion is normal?" I asked. Emma pursed her lips. "In a way, it's for you." I looked at her face. All these years, I had treated her as the sister I grew up with, but at that moment, I realized she was seriously considering the plan Mark had given her. She gently touched my hand. "I know it's hard, but if this could make you a mother." I pulled my hand back. She froze, clearly not expecting my rejection. I set down the glass. "Emma, let's not talk about this now. She looked at me for 2 seconds, nodded, but couldn't help glancing toward the stairs. Is he still upstairs? A sharp sting ran through me. For the next 3 days, Mark spoke to me with an air of, "I've been patiently waiting for you." On Friday evening, he spread out his new spreadsheet on the table. Here's how much we'd save if we used Emma's traditional method. I stared at the numbers, tens of thousands, loans, interest rates. Yet he pointed to the very last line. Total cost, $0. Isn't that clear? He said. We save all that money to put into the child's future education and life. Don't you think this is absurd? I asked. What's absurd is you rejecting the best plan, he pressed quietly. What's absurd is that you'd rather put us in debt than face reality. He leaned forward, hands on the table. What's absurd is that you'd rather have no child. The air felt compressed. At that moment, I realized he wasn't negotiating, he was pressuring me. Layer upon layer, until I couldn't move. That night, I washed dishes while he stood behind me, waiting for me to yield. Don't make it harder than it has to be, he said. Emma already agreed. You're the one obstructing us. I turned off the faucet. You call that obstruction? I asked. He shrugged. What else? You think I enjoy begging you? He came closer, almost whispering in my ear. You're just afraid others can do what you can't. Those words were like a dull nail hammered into the air. I turned to look him in the eyes. He didn't flinch, didn't show guilt, he just waited for me to give in. The light hit his face, making his expression sharp and self-righteous. I didn't yet know that this was only the beginning. I didn't know that he and Emma had already laid a path behind my back, waiting for me to fall into it. I didn't yet know that the first lie he told, not about surrogacy, but pretending I was the problem, was the cruelest deceit of that marriage. But that night's kitchen scene, beginning with his words. If you really want to be a mom, don't be so stubborn. Everything had already derailed. And I, for the first time, clearly saw. I was never the family he wanted. I was just the most convenient sacrifice in his plan. 3 years ago, I remember sitting in the corner of my bedroom after a failed ovulation test. I clutched the white paper in my hand, tears falling onto the bed. Mark stood in the doorway, holding a beer, brows furrowed. That night, the room felt heavy with his words and scent, beer mixed with cologne, like an invisible wall. I'm not crying for you, I said softly. Then who are you crying for? Yourself, he retorted, sharply. He never understood my fear, never allowed me sadness. Every failed attempt, every somber hospital visit, he reminded me that the failure was my fault, not ours. Emma frequently came to help with the dog, but she would casually mention Mark's perfect plan. You know, he's always finding ways to make things quicker and smoother. I forced a smile, knowing those smooth plans were never for me, only for him. Every time she said this, a sharp pang struck me. My relationship with Mark had never been truly equal. Every time I stared at the 2 faint lines on a test, it felt like a small funeral. I remember one night at 10 p.m., curled up on the bathroom floor, tears dripping onto the tiles. Mark peeked from the bedroom door, frowning. Here you go again, self-pitying? I lifted my head, eyes red. Do you know how badly I want a child? He shrugged. Then just want it. But the problem is, you have to be practical. Each accusation, each sarcasm, piled onto me like heavy gray dust. I learned to hide my emotions, smile in front of him, mask my pain after failures. I became an actor, in front of him, the compliant, understanding wife willing to consider the practical surrogacy plan. Alone, I was a trapped prey, eyes defiant. Mark's reliance on Emma raised my suspicions. Once, while organizing old photos with Emma in the living room, he watched TV in the background. Emma pointed to a photo of my parents and me. You two look like a perfect family, she whispered. Her kindness struck me, but I noticed her gaze lingered on Mark longer. He seemed never to notice me, I had barely ever belonged in his sight. That night, I sat quietly on the balcony, tea in hand, fingers tapping the cup rim. The wind played with my hair. I recalled all the endurance, analyzed every argument, every sarcasm, every moment of belittlement. I realized I wasn't powerless, I had observation, patience, strategy. I knew his weaknesses, his overconfidence. Weeks later, I found a stack of his hospital documents on his desk, receipts, reports, medication lists. At that moment, I realized he had pushed all responsibility onto me while hiding his own secrets. I didn't touch the files, just noted every detail, like weaving a waiting net. I began recording his schedule, behavior, and speech patterns. Every subtle change might be part of my future strategy. When Emma mentioned surrogacy again, I stayed silent. "We can help solve this for you," she said. I held my coffee cup, calm. "I'll consider it." Outwardly compliant, she thought I was still struggling. In reality, my mind was working. Every smile, every nod, bought me time. I waited for the right moment to let every lie and threat reveal itself. Mark's pressure came not only from words, but also his control over family and relatives. At gatherings, he would outline his plans for future children, using "we" while excluding me. I was forced to laugh, forced to agree, while he took it for granted. This long-term pressure created a defensive calm in me. I had to be ready to counter his manipulation and make him taste the same fear and loss when the time came. That summer, I finally found the first breakthrough. Mark forgot to lock his filing cabinet. I saw old medical records, male infertility. 2-year-old results showed his sperm count was nearly 0, irreversible. I almost couldn't believe it. My mind raced. He had hidden the truth every time he held my hand in the clinic, while I thought the problem was mine. I took a deep breath, hand on the files, eyes cold. I realized I now held the initiative. I was no longer passive, only waiting for the chance to strike back. The counterattack began when Mark brought up the traditional method again, confidently laying a logic trap. I smiled, nodding, pretending to concede. "You're right, we should be practical." His face brightened like winter sunlight, proud and oblivious. "Then who is more suitable?" he asked, suddenly uncertain. "Ryan, your brother," I replied calmly. "He will help me." His smile froze. He had assumed his brother would always be neutral, never intervening. Now, he faced the reality he feared most. Ryan held a power greater than his own. A few days later, I arranged a weekend coincidence with Ryan. On our balcony, Ryan pointed to my notebook, serious. "See, every lie, every concealment, leaves evidence." I opened the records, highlighting key dialogues, dates, and message screenshots, each is proof of his planned betrayal of me and Emma. Ryan nodded. Once revealed, his plan collapses. "You need timing and composure." I smiled faintly. "Then we wait for him to trap himself." Mark never suspected my composure. One Wednesday evening, he came home to find me in the living room, relaxed, holding Ryan's business card. "Let's talk," I said softly. He sat, brows furrowed. "About what?" I opened the computer, displaying his medical report and message screenshots with Emma. The light reflected on his face. His eyes widened, lips quivering. "No, impossible, this is fake." I shook my head calmly. "No, Mark. It's all real. You are naturally infertile. You hid every responsible opportunity in the shadows. Every time you held my hand in the hospital, every time I cried, you knew the truth but chose to lie." He trembled, hands grasping the table, nearly losing control. How could you?" "Because I am no longer a victim," I interrupted. "I've learned to observe, hide my pain, and lay the board. I've known your secrets with Emma for a long time." I clicked send, sending his infertility report to Emma, along with their conversations. His phone began vibrating violently. His eyes shifted from fear to despair. Hands flailed in the air. You can't, this was my plan, we were supposed to have a child, you can't." Ryan stepped forward, holding him firmly. "Mark, face reality. You never had the ability, and you never had honesty." I watched him tremble in fear. Every breath was a scream. Emma confronted him immediately. You couldn't have children?" Shock and anger in her voice, tears streaming. Mark panicked, clutching her hand, pleading, "Emma, it's not what you think. We can still." Emma laughed coldly. "Still? You lied to yourself and me. I've had enough." She pulled away. Mark collapsed, drained, as if the air itself had been sucked from the room. I sat on the sofa, feeling no triumph, only unprecedented relief. 3 years of humiliation, pressure, pretense, and endurance had ended. Mark had used emotion to manipulate me, money to threaten me, kinship to control me. Now, he collapsed entirely within his own plan. I calmly arranged divorce procedures. Mark was powerless, every document was prepared. Lawyers had all the evidence. The divorce concluded in just 6 months. He lost marriage, family, his secret lover plan, and any illusion of future children. Ryan supported silently, without dramatics, letting Mark gradually comprehend, it was all self-inflicted. Weeks later, I sat alone on the balcony, sunlight spilling onto the teacup. Life returned to peace. I regained control of my time and space. I recalled all past humiliation, every sarcasm, every neglect, every manipulation by him and Emma, now transformed into wisdom and strength. I smiled faintly, flipping through the notebook Ryan left, recording every detail of the plan. Mark lay each night in an empty room, tossing and turning, pondering how his supposedly flawless plan had been dismantled step by step. He couldn't even be sure if I was truly pregnant, or if Ryan would carry the next generation in the future. This uncertainty, this fear, rendered him completely powerless. And I, finally, had complete freedom and liberation.